Hi and welcome to Lecture 4 on Play and Pedagogy. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Whadjuk people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I respect their cultural beliefs and their spiritual relationship with their country and recognise that these are still important to Whadjuk people today. This is art that you see, beautiful art here that you see, is called Witchetty Grub Dreaming, and Jennifer's painting shows women collecting witchetty grubs, and these can be eaten at all stages of their life cycles. Last week we looked at the policy perspectives on play, so the curricular and policy framework for early childhood education and care, the kindergarten curriculum guidelines, and the early years learning framework. This week we're going to recap our learning so far in the lecture, apply our learning as a pedagogical approach, look at different curriculum and pedagogical approaches. In our tutorial we'll look at Fleur's model, Wood's model, the role of the educator in play, and you will have your first assessment 1 quiz. We ask this a lot. What do you see happening in this picture? What are the children learning? The simple act of pouring water into different size containers allows these children to learn about volume and measurement while developing their hand-eye coordination and working cooperatively. Regardless of our pedagogical approach, play-based learning, emergent curriculum and integrated curriculum, regio approach, child-centred curriculum, project approach, whatever, all learning must be linked to the outcomes in the West Australian curriculum or EYLF. You can see here, play is not frivolous. It enhances brain structure and function and enhances executive function, the process of learning rather than content, which allows us to pursue goals and ignores distractions. I want us to consider using the Australian curriculum and the EYLF in conjunction with a play-based philosophy. Early childhood service providers, educators and families influence children's development, whether it's for the better or the worse. So we need to develop children's cognition and higher level thinking skills using relational pedagogies that are neuroscientifically aligned. So we have to align the Australian curriculum and the EYLF as well as that play-based philosophy. Once we remember the components of play, that they have to be voluntary, they choose to do, but other children can be invited to do so. It has to be intrinsically motivated. It's in its own reward. It needs to be meaningful to the players, but the meaning may not always be clear to an observer and often pleasurable. It has to be there usually is a sense of enjoyment. By extending play, is it challenging? Symbolic, active, physically and mentally, or both? Playing with objects and ideas, for example. It is process orientated. It's enjoyed for the activity itself, not concerned with the end product. So as you can see, it's true education by definition. It occurs everywhere. It's supported by nature. It's enriched by quality relationships, enriched by quality environments, and it's educationally enriched by the educators planning for it. Revisiting our ages and stages, we have here the babies 0 to 1. We've got our exploration. So looking at objects, voices, music, pictures, facing, lots of draw. And we've got our little wobblers, year 1 to 3. So that's about really exploring, they're getting on the move. They really want to know their environment, touching, chasing. So they need a secure base in relationships, lots of sensory engagement. In our toddlers, it's all about extension, risk, materials, support, imagination, physical and other children. And attachment, again, is still a really crucial focus there too. Our preschoolers, we're looking at getting into school, 3 to 6. Start with that imagination, freedom, facilitation. They look at symbolism, like to be physical, start to make friends, all that social and emotional development. Young children in 6 to 8, we start with school progression. So support, rules, peer groups, clubs, engagement, play and inquiry continue. So our types and categories of play. We've got unoccupied play, solitary, onlooker, spectator, parallel, associative, cooperative. You know what all of those mean. It's a beautiful picture there. Which types and characters are evident in your vignette that you're studying for your assignment? You need to be able to refer back to them as well. So the types and categories of play sometimes can be defined by the activity. So, for example, you might see a pretend, imaginative, creative, physical, risky, or dependent on a particular activity that they're doing. So it can go over different types and categories. Our most comprehensive that we have are Hughes' taxonomy of play types. So that's those 16 types that we focused on. And sometimes, again, they're determined by materials. So the examples that you're providing, blocks and sand and water and messy play as well. We've looked at a neuro perspective, how the brain is built through those synaptic connections that occur through emotional and physical experiences. Both the emotional and physical experiences stimulate play, motivations that are the foundation of thinking. This is what builds those synaptic connections used for school, and they need to be repetitive. So they need lots and lots of opportunities to develop those strong synaptic connections. So the things which support this are movement, relationships, stimulation, the act of creation, which underpins all true play. This is nature's design for human development. Some environments are supportive and others are not so supportive. So you could think of that. What's an environment that's going to be supportive to develop those relationships, movement, stimulation, and creation? So what do we have? We talk about planning, enacting, assessing, evaluating, that reflective cycle of ongoing teaching and learning that decisions that professionals make. We have to ask those questions about our environment, differentiation, do we have balanced content, extension opportunities? So we have to see what's happening and find the gaps between our pedagogy and our practice to be able to provide the child's optimal experiences. We question ourselves in order to improve the experience and better the outcome. We've looked at the NQS as part of being the National Quality Framework, which consists of the Education and Care Service National Law, the Education and Care Services National Regulations, National Quality Standard Rating and Assessment Process. The way quality is defined and reflected in the National Quality Standard is a key aspect of the National Quality Framework. So how many areas do we have? We've got our 7 areas. How many standards? We have 18. And how many elements? 58 that describe the outcomes that contribute to the standard being achieved. We know that the standard is organised into the following quality areas: educational program practice, children's health and safety, physical environment, staffing arrangements, relationships with children, collaborative partnerships with families and communities, and leadership and service management. The early years framework informs the development of a program for each child that enhances their learning and development. At the moment, professional development is being provided to all early childhood educators in every public, Catholic and independent school to facilitate high quality programs in accordance with the National Quality Standard. So that's up to Year 2. Western Australia has embraced the NQS as a landmark opportunity to leverage ongoing improvements across the early years of schooling. So here we have a holistic look at our theorists, the developmental domains, the neuroscience influences, what you should consider in each of those, and how pedagogy relates to that. Take some time to pause and read that slide. So, are early childhood programs changing? What some of our observations currently tell us. Once upon a time, not too long ago, early childhood teachers were more interested in children than necessarily curriculum content. Have you seen teachers that don't seem to like the children? Are they more invested in serving the needs of other adults, ticking off checklists per se? One way you can clearly see this is the way reporting has changed. Reporting in pre-primary, they may not have even had a report, but that might have been a progress report. It focused on listening and playing with others. This progress report has changed to now a more formal report, reporting on performance in relative to expectations in sections on reading, speaking and listening, writing, science, HASS, and work habits and maths, as well as skills. There's a single line for the comments in each content area. We do not attend, for example, to the future architect who builds with block, designing structures, managing materials, and testing the laws of physics. We also ignore the aesthetic child who loves to paint, draws, sings, dances. Children are producing products rather than focusing on the process. One reason many teachers favour worksheets is that they provide evidence for parents of what their children are doing. Instead of sending home worksheets, you could carefully write a weekly letter to parents detailing activities that related to the learning that's happening. And it's a great compliment to answer the question, what did you do at school today, without a generic we played. Also, something like the app Seesaw, you can video parts of the day and talk about the learning that's happening. Little snapshots as well, sending home. I do recognise and understand that today's children are different from those even a decade ago, and that early childhood programs must evolve in the same way. But are children smarter today than before? No, not necessarily. Can they learn things sooner? No. So then why are we pushing them to grow up so quickly? Interesting to reflect. Teachers do feel pressure to encourage children to produce rather than focusing on the process of the engagement. Therefore, play can be reduced. A good idea is to start having a look at school reports, see what they demonstrate about pedagogies and beliefs on children and learning. Is it more important that an adult is in a status profession, or that they hold values that serve them and others well? Contributing to society tomorrow will mean different things in the future, and it will be in ways that we can't even predict. We need creative minds who can relate to others, people who will be active participants and creative. How can they be if we already know what they will become? Products last, but learning evolves and expands. What's the point of knowing the names of clouds if you don't know what they represent. So, are our children being dumbed down by production rather than fascination? So, how do we retain the play? The early childhood community, which has traditionally valued play as a learning tool, has not been very articulate about play's importance in our evidence-based school economy. It's no longer enough to argue that play is the work of children. We're now required to prove what children get from play. So Lenny Bartlett says, early childhood educators need to be articulate, to be able to justify clearly, provide evidence for, and proclaim the benefits of play-based learning. So as you can see, play and work there. So we have different approaches. Approaches to curriculum learning and the pedagogies used to support these approaches should be consistent with your philosophy or the setting's philosophical perspectives, depending on the school, the early childhood care unit, and be relevant to that specific setting. So what is philosophy? It's what we believe about children. Our pedagogies are how we transform our philosophy and approaches into practice. So it's those deliberate teaching actions and processes. Our approaches to the curriculum learning reflects our beliefs about how children learn and develop, the role of the families, communities and educators in children's learning, and what is important for children now and in the future. So here's some different approaches. This list is not definitive and approaches do overlap. So we've got an adult-centred approach, child-centred approach, also called learner-centred and teacher-centred approach. So a child-centred approach takes into account each child's strengths, interests and experiences as well as their need. The children initiate and direct experiences and the educator provides resources and support. The children are in control of their learning. In contrast, an adult-centred approach is one where educators decide what and how children will learn. There is little account of children's interests, learning styles or engagement with the topic. Lessons or experiences are pre-selected, pre-sequenced to reflect the agenda of the setting. This focuses on getting the content across or covering the curriculum. Teaching and learning are controlled by the educator. Play-based approach. A play-based approach enables children to draw on their family and community experiences and funds of knowledge. It enables children to develop their dispositions and to transfer current understandings to new contexts that extend learning. Play builds on children's learning interests and strengths and offers learning potential for children of all ages through children's investigations and representations. Play is child-initiated and pleasurable and encourages exploration and risk-taking, promoting interaction with peers that scaffold children's learning. Emergent and predetermined approaches. They focus on potential curriculum and documenting what happens rather than pre-planned experiences, so something like Reggio. This does not mean there is no planning. The planning is shared with the learners. An emergent curriculum responds to, expands and builds upon the ideas and interests of the children in the group, collectively and individually. The emergent curriculum is not just based on the children's interests, it's based on negotiation and collaboration between children, educators and families. So a predetermined approach occurs when educators take a permanent and non-responsive approach to curriculum. In such an approach, educators may draw on last year's program, available, from resources from a website, or more commonly in school settings, the predetermined and learning outcomes from pre-planned units from the syllabus documents, or like NAPLAN pre-planning. Developmentally appropriate practice. This approach focuses on child development and curriculum that is perceived to be appropriate for children at different ages. There is some concern that DAP predominantly follows rather than leads children's development. It's two-dimensional, age-appropriate and individual appropriateness. You've got your multi-intelligence approaches. MI approach espouse the view that children learn in different ways, given that linguistic and logical mathematical intelligence are the ones that are often privileged in education settings. An MI approach seeks to expand the range of intelligence that are catered for in the classroom. Looking at the project approach, it's Reggio-inspired. This approach aims to provide children with opportunities to engage in an in-depth learning of events and phenomena in their worlds. Children are encouraged to make choices and decisions and to follow their interests as they engage in collaborative small group projects. The key feature of a project is that it is a research effort deliberately focused on finding answers to questions about a topic posed by the children and or the teacher. Transmission or constructivist approaches stems from understanding of learning, which advocate that direct instruction followed by a practice as individuals or small groups can increase children's skills and content knowledge. It includes using sequenced activities and standardised assessment designed to provide evidence of children's learning. An extreme example of this is direct instruction systems for teaching maths or literacy. And looking at the constructivist approach. So that emphasises the importance of hands-on active learning with stimulating open-ended materials that encourage manipulation and transformation. Children choose materials and play partners, change and build on their play ideas, and plan activities according to their interests and needs. So there's a lot covered there in those different approaches. So we need to find that balance. We don't necessarily want a loosely structured classroom or a highly structured classroom either. Play does not mean anything goes. It does not deteriorate into chaos, nor is play so tightly structured by adults that children are denied the opportunity to learn through their own initiative and exploration. There needs to be a balance of child-initiated play in the presence of engaged teachers that are more focused, experiential learning guided by the teachers. So to do this, we must be able to articulate why we maintain a play-based philosophy. Educators need to be present to the children, their families, their relationships, their stages of development, what are their interests, their cultural differences. Can you think of any others? And using the knowledge and beliefs that you have developed as a professional to create dynamic, responsive educational experiences. Think. A play-based pedagogy, which is learning environments that are planned, purposeful and intentional. Indoor and outdoor given equal priority. Play-based learning centres, bays set up. You have inquiry provocations and invitations. Play that allows children to work through Bloom's taxonomy right up to the evaluate and create. Support for true play. The environment and importance for play. You've got to have time for children to engage in deep play. It needs to have choice, child initiated and child directed. Pause and take some time now to read this slide. It's Fleer's Planning for Play model. We'll look at another one on the next slide, but have a look and read to see about the child control and the adult control. And here we have Wood's model of play. Again, looking at child control versus adult control. Again, take a pause and read each of those categories. It's important to think critically. Should teachers continue to divide their time between play and academic work? Is it possible to combine the two? What could this actually look like? Free play provides children with the most opportunity for self-direction and exploration, but tends to disappear from education programs for older children. Have a look back over the definition of play and the characteristics of play. Can you think of some examples to justify your position should teachers continue to divide their time between play and academic work? What could that look like? How would you do it? So our planning for play, we need to be able to have play-based learning, and it's characterised as planned and purposeful activity built around a well-resourced environment and rich interactions with adults. So the task of an early childhood teacher is to make the curriculum meaningful and engaging, and to use play and other effective strategies to intentionally promote each child's continuing progress. It takes commitment and conscious planning to provide an evidence-based play program. Our final thought. Early childhood teachers providing play-based programs aren't mindlessly resisting new methods in favour of an outdated tradition. Rather, they're fighting to keep children at the centre of early childhood education.